Imagine the most immersive movie theater you have ever been in. Like the lights go pitch black, the surround sound just washes over you. The music tells you exactly what the villain is secretly thinking before they even open their mouth.
Right, yeah. It sets the whole mood.
Exactly. And you probably think Hollywood invented that entire experience, but no. It was actually invented over 150 years ago. And get this, it was by a man who spent his life dodging debt collectors, running from the police for treason, and alienating basically everyone who tried to help him.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. So today we are unpacking the chaotic, highly controversial life of Richard Wagner. We're doing a deep dive into the biographical archives to separate the man, the myths, and the masterpieces. Our mission today is to explore this intensely polarizing figure and understand how his staggering creative genius completely rewired how we experience storytelling.
Because the sheer scale of his influence is, well, it's hard to overstate.
Yeah.
You really don't need to know a single thing about classical music to feel his impact. I mean, the whole structure of modern media, how a narrative pulls you in and holds you hostage emotionally, that is all built on the foundation he poured.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually when we look back at historical giants, we expect this clean narrative, right? Like a marble statue of a person whose noble life reflects their monumental achievement.
Yeah, and Wagner shatters that statue immediately.
Completely. So to understand how we got the modern cinematic score, we have to look at how this revolutionary mindset was forged. He was born in 1813 in Leipzig. And looking at the records of his early years, a quiet, stable life was never really on the table.
Far from it, honestly. I mean, 6 months after he was born, his biological father died. His mother eventually moved in with, and likely married, a man named Ludwig Geyer. And Geyer was an actor and a playwright.
So he grew up right in the middle of the theater world.
It's exactly. Geyer's life revolved around the theater, and that environment became young Richard's entire world. But the funny thing is, he didn't start out wanting to write music. He actually wanted to be a dramatist.
Wait, really? Not a composer?
Nope. His very first major creative endeavor as a teenager was this massive blood-soaked tragedy that was heavily influenced by Shakespeare.
That is so interesting because most composers of that era would just hire a writer, right? They would get someone else to write the script, the libretto, and they would just focus on the melodies.
Right, yeah. But Wagner ends up writing all of his own libretti for his entire career. He had to control the narrative. He actually had to beg his family to let him take formal music lessons.
Just so he could score his own play.
Yeah, he realized his teenage tragedy needed a soundtrack to fully convey the emotion.
Yeah.
So he approached the music as a tool to serve the drama, not the other way around.
So he gets his start, but from what I read, his 20s are just a complete disaster.
Total disaster.
Yeah, he marries an actress named Minna Planer, and it is just a tempestuous, toxic relationship right from the jump. He takes a job as a musical director in Magdeburg. The theater company goes bankrupt, and he is just left holding the bag.
Right, and he's literally running from bailiffs. It is chaos.
At one point, he and Minna are cornered in Riga. They are drowning in debt, and they have to illegally slip across the border just to escape their creditors. It's like a bad rock star movie.
It really is. And that escape route is where his turbulent life and his art first violently collide. They manage to secure passage on a small smuggling ship headed for London.
A smuggling ship. You can't make this up.
You really can't.
Okay.
And they get caught in a terrifying multi-day storm in the North Sea. They actually have to seek refuge in a Norwegian fjord.
Wow.
Yeah, and hearing the sailors echoing their calls against the walls of the fjord during that storm, that planted the seed for his first major breakthrough opera, The Flying Dutchman.
So a literal near-death experience gives him his ghost story. That is incredible. But they survive, they make it to Paris, and he is still utterly destitute. How did this constant state of financial panic shape his artistic ambition? I feel like that would just crush any creative spirit.
Well, it forced a relentless hustle that exposed him to everything. In Paris, he had no wealthy patrons. So to survive, he wrote journalism, he published short stories, and he took on this grueling, unglamorous work.
Like what kind of work?
He was arranging other people's hit operas for the piano so amateurs could play them at home.
Oh man, so he's basically writing sheet music for pop covers.
Exactly, and he hated the commercialism of it, but it allowed him to dissect the mechanics of what made popular music work.
Yep.
All while privately building his own massive rebellious theories on what music drama should actually be.
He is stuck doing cover songs while writing his own epic in the background, and that background epic is Rienzi. When Rienzi finally gets accepted and staged in Dresden in 1842, it is a smash hit.
It really is. It rescues him from the Parisian gutters.
Yeah, he lands this incredibly prestigious, secure job as the Royal Saxon Court Conductor.
which was a huge deal. He achieved the stability he had been chasing for a decade. He had a regular salary, royal favor, and control over a major orchestra.
You would think finally getting royal acclaim would calm him down, but because his whole artistic philosophy was about breaking old, rigid structures, he couldn't help but apply that to politics, too.
Right, he just couldn't turn it off.
Yeah, that anti-establishment streak threw him right into the 1849 Dresden uprising. The revolutionary spirit sweeping Europe caught him up, and he started running with socialists and anarchists like Mikhail Bakunin.
And he wasn't just passing out pamphlets. Right?
No, he was actively involved in the rebellion. When the military crushed that uprising, Wagner went from being the royal conductor to a wanted fugitive with a bounty on his head.
It is just such a massive fall from grace. He had to flee Germany entirely, sneaking across the border again, and that kicked off a 12-year exile, mostly spent in Switzerland.
And this exile is the crucible for him. Stripped of his royal title, isolated from the theaters, he stops composing and just starts writing these incredibly dense, aggressive essays. This is where he drops the concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk.
The total work of art. Yeah, he looked at traditional opera and basically declared it fundamentally broken.
Right, because traditional opera at the time was almost like a variety show. A singer steps up to the front of the stage, delivers a beautiful solo aria to show off their vocal gymnastics. The crowd claps, and the plot completely pauses.
Yeah, it breaks the immersion entirely.
Exactly. Then they do some fast talk singing, the recitative, just to rush through the plot so the next singer can do their solo. Wagner wanted to be the ultimate showrunner.
He did. He wanted a closed ecosystem where the lighting, the lyrics, the stagecraft, and the orchestra are all handcuffed together, dragging the audience through the story without a single break.
He argued the drama must unfold as a continuous breathing narrative. The music shouldn't pause for applause. It should evolve organically from the poetry and the action on stage. Everything serves the total illusion.
But when you dig into the archives from this exact same exile period, you hit the absolute darkest parts of his psyche. In 1850, he publishes an essay titled Judaism in Music.
And we need to talk about this because it is a jarring read today. In it, he argued, using incredibly vulgar language, that Jews were permanent outsiders in European society. He claimed they were disconnected from the true national spirit and therefore biologically incapable of creating genuine, profound art.
And he specifically targeted composers who were immensely popular at the time, like Giacomo Meyerbeer. What makes the attack on Meyerbeer so striking historically is that Meyerbeer had actually been a crucial early supporter of Wagner.
Right, he had used his influence to help get Rienzi staged in Dresden, essentially launching Wagner's career.
Yeah. And in the essay, Wagner accused Jewish composers of treating art merely as a commercial enterprise to cater to the masses for profit. Again, we are just looking at what the source texts say to understand his mindset.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean? How do we reconcile his revolutionary ideas about art with these deeply hateful personal views? We are looking at a man obsessed with the idea of a pure, unified German culture who viewed anything outside of his rigid definition as a literal threat to his artistic vision.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this exile period birthed both his darkest prejudices and his most ambitious project, which is the Ring des Nibelungen, the Ring Cycle.
Oh man, the scale of the Ring Cycle is still mind-boggling. 4 interconnected operas, 15 hours of continuous music.
It is a sprawling mythological epic involving Norse gods, dwarves, magic rings, and the fiery end of the world. It was designed to be the ultimate uncompromising execution of the Gesamtkunstwerk. He spent over 25 years on and off trying to finish it.
And that on and off part is what fascinates me. He spends years building this 15-hour universe, and then right in the middle of writing it, he just stops.
He literally puts the masterwork in a drawer.
Yeah, and it's because of 2 completely chaotic outside influences, his wealthy patron's wife and a dead philosopher.
The philosopher being Arthur Schopenhauer. Wagner reads Schopenhauer's work, which is rooted in philosophical pessimism. Schopenhauer argued that the physical world is just an illusion, and the only true reality is this blind, irrational driving force he called will.
And crucially, Schopenhauer stated that music was the direct, supreme expression of this universal will.
Yes. This raises an important question, though. Did Schopenhauer change Wagner's music? The answer is a definitive yes. Up until now, Wagner's whole theory was that music had to serve the words.
Right, so how does reading a book actually change the physical notes a composer writes on a page?
Well, reading Schopenhauer gave him permission to unleash the orchestra. Wagner realized that words can only describe surface-level thoughts, but music is the subconscious. Music is the will.
Ah, I see.
So instead of the orchestra just accompanying the singers, the orchestra becomes the main character. It tells the audience the deep psychological truths the characters on stage are too afraid to say out loud.
And he pours all of this philosophical revelation into a deeply messy real-life situation. While he's living in Switzerland, his primary financial backer is a wealthy silk merchant named Otto Wissendonck.
Right. Otto loans him money, even lets Wagner live in a cottage on his estate.
Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Wagner repays this immense generosity by becoming intensely infatuated with Otto's wife, Mathilde Wissendonck.
It was a wildly audacious betrayal of his patron. But from an artistic perspective, this forbidden, unconsummated passion for Mathilde, combined with Schopenhauer's philosophy of unstoppable will, demands a new outlet.
He can't put this into the ring cycle.
Exactly. He needs to write Tristan and Isolde, a tragic story of doomed, forbidden love. And to capture that feeling of forbidden love, he breaks the rules of music itself.
To understand what he did, we really have to look at how tonality works. For centuries, Western music was built on tension and release. You venture out into complex chords, but you always resolve back to a comfortable home key.
It gives the listener a sense of closure.
But Wagner weaponizes that expectation. The very opening of Tristan and Isolde features what we now call the Tristan chord. It's a highly dissonant chord that demands to be resolved.
But instead of returning to the home key, Wagner moves to another unresolved chord. He strings the listener along, delaying the musical resolution for hours. It creates a sensation of endless, agonizing, unfulfilled yearning.
It physically mimics the feeling of a love you can never actually have. The music never lets you rest. And music historians point to that specific chord as the fracture point, where 20th century modernist atonal music begins.
He breaks the home key entirely. But at the time, practically speaking, this music was so radical that when he finally tried to get it staged in Vienna, the singers in the orchestra literally gave up.
Wait, really? They just quit?
Yeah, after dozens of rehearsals, they declared it impossible to perform, which brings him to his absolute lowest point.
Right. By 1864, he is in his early 50s. His marriage to Minna is effectively over. The affair with Mathilde is done. His new masterpieces are deemed unplayable. And he is, once again, drowning in catastrophic debt, fleeing from creditors.
It really seems like it's over. But then, the most absurd rescue in classical music history happens.
Enter King Ludwig II of Bavaria. He's an 18-year-old kid who becomes king, and he happens to be an absolute obsessive superfan of Richard Wagner.
He has the treasury of an entire nation at his disposal, and he basically decides to become Wagner's personal ATM. Ludwig sends his agents to track Wagner down.
And he pays off every single cent of Wagner's massive debts.
Every cent. He sets him up in a luxurious villa in Munich, provides a massive salary, and promises unlimited resources to stage Tristan, The Ring, and whatever else Wagner desires.
The letters between them are so intense. Ludwig speaks of Wagner with almost religious adoration. So Wagner finally has everything he ever wanted. Unlimited money, royal protection, a dedicated theater.
And naturally, he immediately initiates the ultimate scandal to jeopardize all of it.
Of course he does. He begins an affair with a woman named Cosima. She is 24 years younger than him and the illegitimate daughter of the famous composer Franz Liszt. But the real kicker, she is married to Hans von Bülow.
And Hans von Bülow is the conductor that Wagner and the king have hired to premiere Tristan and Isolde in Munich.
The psychology of this is just bizarre. Bülow is sweating through rehearsals, dedicating his life to deciphering this impossible score about forbidden love, while his wife is secretly having Wagner's child.
In fact, Cosima gives birth to a daughter named Isolde right around the time of the premiere.
Wow. The scandal was impossible to hide. The political advisors in Munich were already terrified of how much money and influence Wagner had over the young king.
Yeah, this public humiliation of Bülow was the final straw. By the end of 1865, Ludwig's cabinet forced the king to expel Wagner from Munich, though Ludwig kept secretly funneling him money from afar.
Wagner eventually marries Cosima, and with her fierce organizational skills and the king's endless bankroll, Wagner turns his attention to his final, impossible dream. A regular opera house isn't good enough for the Gesamtkunstwerk. He needs to build a custom temple for his own art.
He finds a plot of land in the town of Bayreuth called the Green Hill. Here, he designs the Bayreuth Festspielhaus, a theater engineered from the ground up to manipulate the audience's senses and stage the complete 15-hour ring cycle.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's unpack how this physically worked, because it wasn't just about the aesthetics, it was a total feat of acoustic engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
Before Bayreuth, opera houses kept the house lights up. You were there to be seen by the other rich people. You chatted, you read along with the script. Wagner plunged the auditorium into total darkness.
You couldn't look at your neighbor. You were forced to stare at the stage. He also fundamentally redesigned the orchestra pit.
Typically, the orchestra sat right in front of the stage, visible to everyone. The conductor waving his arms, the violinist sawing away. It was a huge visual distraction.
Right, so Wagner designed a tiered pit that sank deep under the stage, covered by a curved acoustic baffle. It was completely invisible to the audience.
So it's literally a physical mixing board made of wood and architecture. The brass instruments are way at the bottom, the strings are at the top, the sound fires backward, hits a curved wooden wall, bounces up to the stage floor to mix perfectly with the singers' voices, and then washes out into the darkened theater as one unified wall of sound.
It is brilliant. You don't know where the music's coming from. It just feels like it's rising out of the earth. When the theater finally opened in 1876 for the premiere of the complete ring cycle, it drew emperors, intellectuals, and the greatest composers of the age.
It was an overwhelming sensory experience that really cemented his status as an artist of unparalleled influence. And the invisible pit allowed the audience to focus entirely on his greatest narrative weapon, the leitmotif.
It's a term we hear a lot, but how does it actually function mechanically in his work? Well, a leitmotif is a specific musical phrase attached to a character, an object, or an idea. But Wagner didn't just use them as static theme songs. He used them as a mutating musical DNA.
Let's say a character on stage is lying. They might be singing a very pleasant, reassuring melody, but down in the invisible pit, the orchestra is softly playing the jagged, ominous motif associated with a curse or betrayal.
It's the ultimate dramatic irony. The music tells the audience the truth even when the words are lying. The cultural critic Theodore Adorno pointed out that this is the exact mechanism that birthed modern cinema scoring.
It's John Williams using two low notes to tell you the shark is approaching in Jaws before you even see the water. It's how you know Darth Vader is entering the room. It's why Wagner's own music is an instantly recognizable shorthand for epic drama.
Like the helicopters swarming in Apocalypse Now, or Bugs Bunny on a mountain in the iconic Looney Tunes short, What's Opera, Doc?
Exactly. But that immense, almost overwhelming emotional power of his music, combined with his fierce nationalism and his anti-Semitic writings, created an incredibly dark shadow over his legacy in the 20th century. Looking at the historical archives of the 1930s and 40s, we see how his work was aggressively appropriated.
Adolf Hitler was personally obsessed with Wagner. He'd visited Bayreuth frequently since the 1920s. Hitler looked at these sprawling operas and projected his own twisted vision of German supremacy and heroic myth directly onto them.
The regime used elements of Wagner's work for state propaganda, though it's fascinating historically to see how they had to cherry-pick what they used.
Yeah, the wider hierarchy of the party actually resented having to sit through these massive 15-hour epics just to appease Hitler, and top ideologists actively rejected Wagner's final opera, Parsifal, because its themes of compassion and Christian pacifism completely contradicted their militaristic agenda.
The sources also clarify the historical reality regarding the Holocaust. Records show that Wagner's music was played over loudspeakers at the Dachau concentration camp in the 1930s as a form of psychological torment to re-educate political prisoners.
However, historians note there is no documented evidence supporting the myth that his music was explicitly played at the extermination camps. In fact, it was reportedly banned there.
But the association with the regime's ideology left a permanent scar. Performing his music in the state of Israel today remains a profound source of debate and protest.
Because his music bypasses the intellect and taps straight into primal emotion and myth, it acts as an emotional blank canvas. This is why his work is so shockingly adaptable to completely opposing ideologies.
It wasn't just the right wing claiming him. Left-wing thinkers found just as much utility in his work. George Bernard Shaw famously analyzed the ring cycle and saw it as a brilliant, scathing critique of unregulated industrial capitalism.
Right, the dwarves mining gold representing the exploited working class. And decades later, psychoanalysts looked at the exact same operas and saw incredibly detailed maps of the human subconscious. They were analyzing his characters through Freudian lenses before Freud even published his major works.
Whoever looks into the overwhelming scale of Wagner's art tends to see their own worldview reflected back at them. It is a mirror that reflects the absolute highest peaks of human ambition and the lowest depths of human prejudice.
Richard Wagner's personal life was a trail of ruined marriages, broken friendships, unpaid debts, and bigotry. Yet, the creative mechanisms he built to escape that chaos literally rewired how we process storytelling.
He obliterated the idea that art was just polite background entertainment. He proved that a narrative could be a totalizing, inescapable environment.
Which brings us right back to where we started.
Yeah, and I want to leave you with a final thought as you go about your day. Think about that obsession with the Gesamtkunstwerk, the perfectly unified, immersive world. Look around at today's entertainment landscape. Look at the billions being poured into sprawling, interconnected cinematic universes.
Or the tech industry racing to build fully immersive virtual reality headsets.
Exactly. Hyper-realistic video games, where the environment, the sound, and the story respond to your every move. Is it possible that the entire modern entertainment industry, with all its cutting-edge microchips and spatial audio, is really just trying to catch up to the blueprint a fugitive composer drew up in the 1850s? Just something to think about the next time the lights go down in the theater. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.